disruptions. To offer insights into navigating global challenges in the era of rapid change, we have with us today another esteemed figure, Mr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs, Government of India, a distinguished diplomat and a strategic thinker who has played a pivotal role in shaping India's foreign policy, strengthening global partnerships and addressing geopolitical shifts. Let us welcome him with a huge round of applause on the stage to please share with us your thoughts, sir.
Namaskar, and it's a great good evening. It's a great pleasure to join you all today at this event that Business Today organizes annually. Now, I suppose it's not very often that a minister is selected for a business award, but I take it as a reflection of the government's support for our economic interests abroad, as well as for foreign policy decisions that have facilitated growth and development at home. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it has never been more important to read the geopolitical tea leaves right, because today they fundamentally impinge both on our opportunities and our challenges. Let me underline that while we may be speaking here in this hall of businesses, at the end of the day, this is really about job creation. In many ways, it is about our national progress and prosperity. It is only when businesses are successful at home or abroad that we can have the resources, the technologies, indeed the opportunities that would ensure a Viksit Bharat. Now, like any other domain, business also faces the challenges of a world in churn. In fact, I would say to some extent, even in disarray. The last few years have already seen multiple stresses on the global economy, which is already in difficulties. The underlying issue has been the accumulated consequences of over-concentrated manufacturing, as well as massive subsidies and sectoral protection. The full impact of that was visible during the COVID pandemic on the fragility of supply chains. The Ukraine conflict created an additional set of concerns, especially those pertaining to food, to fuel, and to fertilizers. And when sourcing from key producers became challenging, its ripple impact actually spread across all businesses and all geographies. The fighting that we have seen since October 2023 in West Asia or the Middle East has added another dimension, because we have seen maritime shipping disrupted, and this has particular consequences for the Asia-Europe traffic. From time to time, business, in fact international economy, has also experienced the effects of extreme climate events. Now, on top of all of this, there are the economic consequences of sharper geopolitical competition. The digital and the technology worlds have felt the implication of this polarization most visibly. After decades of hearing the virtues of globalization, today the world is grappling with the reality of industrial policies, export controls, and tariff wars. In such a scenario, it is essential to identify advantageous trends and adapt our policies accordingly. First and foremost, there is the widespread concern today about de-risking the global economy. The solution lies in more diversified manufacturing, Mr. Birla referred to it, in more innovation and technology, and in stronger trade, including those that pertain directly to food and health security. Put together, what that means is a re-globalization that is fairer, that is more democratic, that is less riskier than its earlier model. Now, we in India know this as Atmanirbhar Bharat when it comes to our own policy, which is propelled in particular by Make in India. Other nations, of course, have their own particular variants. Now, flowing from that is the next priority of creating reliable, resilient, and I would even argue redundant supply chains. In some domains, such as food, health, or energy, that could mean shorter supply chains. For example, we've seen where the Gulf is concerned that they value India particularly because we are a proximate and a reliable provider of daily necessities. But it could also mean more distant sourcing if costs and logistics support it. Our growing trade, for example, with Latin America is an example. Now, while this will present us in India with new opportunities, it also means that we will have to raise the level of our game. The infrastructure progress that we have seen, especially after we launched the Gati Shakti initiative, has also been greatly helpful in this regard. We need today a parallel endeavor in regard to human resources so that our skills and talents meet the requirements of our contemporary times. There is a reordering happening right now, both in terms of location and flows. India must strive to capture its benefits to the extent possible. The digital world has an even greater sense of insecurity when it comes to sourcing and collaboration. Where data is stored, where it is processed, and how it is deployed are today a matter of crucial importance as we enter the era of AI. The logic of the market has to be balanced by the compulsions of privacy and of security. Stronger political relationships become a factor in calculations. Putting efficiency, talent, and such comfort together, it is understandable today that India features much more strongly on the radars of others, especially when it comes to global capability centers. Translating trust into business will be an overwhelming compulsion. The Trade and Technology Council, TTC, that we established with the European Union is designed to address this precise objective. A policy decision that has significant economic implications in recent years was our assertion of energy choices in the aftermath of the Ukraine conflict. The truth was that every nation did what was in their self-interest, even if some professed otherwise. But as a larger trend, the fifth biggest economy of the world must necessarily develop a broad and diverse set of energy relationships. Technology and logistics advancements have ensured that distance is no longer a consideration. This is not just about multiplicity of sources, they give us better outcomes as well. Now, ensuring that our nation has a favorable energy environment, because we have decades of growth ahead of us, to ensure that we have a favorable energy environment for coming decades is understandably one of our key diplomatic objectives. Beyond fossil fuels, it extends to developing and deploying renewables on a large scale, as well as exploring the potential of small modular reactors. Remember, the world of AI and the world of EV are going to generate much higher energy demands on top of the natural needs of greater prosperity. If data is the new oil, then data centers are the new refineries, and they will need to be powered. Ladies and gentlemen, the global marketplace was always a competitive one. But the trend has been accentuated by governments all over the world now stepping out more vigorously in support of businesses. We cannot and should not be otherwise. You would all agree that Indian embassies today are far more active than before in the pursuit of our commercial interests. They inform, they advise, they facilitate wherever possible to ensure that our businesses do well. We have also been proactive in many regions, organizing business conclaves to familiarize ourselves with the landscape and its opportunities. In fact, we just did one last week in respect of Latin America and the Caribbean, and we had done it a little bit before with regard to Africa and the Mediterranean. In my own visits abroad, the advocacy of our interest is supported by the presence of business representatives. One mechanism that has been effective in introducing Indian products and services into new markets has been under the line of credits which are offered under what we call the IDEAS scheme. On occasion, this has been supplemented by grant assistance. In the last decade, we have engaged as many as 78 nations, so 78 different markets, through such mechanisms. In many cases, whether it is projects, exports, or servicing, there have been repeat orders or additional businesses directly placed by the partner nation, or in fact by others for whom work, even if not done in their own country, has nevertheless served as a reference point. So we have seen this from water pipelines to road building to power transmission, even to the supply of buses. Now, as we contemplate a more technology and services driven future, it is important to plan and prepare for the global workplace. The mismatch between demand and demography is by now glaringly apparent in many societies. But the reconciliation does not happen by itself. It requires engaging the concerned governments as well as building a national brand of talent and of our work ethic. With many nations, it has taken the form of mobility partnerships. Others have preferred a less structured solution that are based on their own practices and pathways. We have, in fact, steered our partner nations towards educational talent and skill reservoirs so that they understand the value that India today has to offer. This has involved engaging government agencies as much as educational institutions, corporates, and service providers. As our citizens go out in greater numbers for business, for jobs, for education, or even for tourism, it is also important that they feel secure in their travels. We have gone the extra mile to ensure, whether it is through evacuation operations, resources for assisting those in distress, or just something as simple as efficient replacement of travel documents. We have gone the extra mile to ensure that this happens. Another facet of globalization has been the growth of tourism. Today, we see that not just as a leisure industry, but one essential to the MICE world, as indeed to the medical one. As India connects better through stronger aviation and more airports, the potential that tourism holds as an economic driver only increases. In fact, just as GCC addresses the demands of industry, a similar phenomenon is unfolding in respect of health. heal in India is a concept whose moment has arrived. But to make all of this, to make all of this deliver better, India's branding and ease of access has to grow along with the infrastructure. Therefore, tourism promotion has become an equally significant aspect of our diplomacy. Friends, I have so far touched upon different aspects of how foreign policy advances our economic goals, be they at home or abroad. While each would have its own players and constituencies, a large economy like India also needs an overall strategy. You can call it a business strategy, an economic one, or the core of our efforts to promote and strengthen our comprehensive national power. But it is only a consolidated approach that can give effective guidance to those who engage with other economies and countries. At its most basic level, such a strategy would lay out a landscape of our challenges and opportunities in national terms. Going beyond that, it spells out specific domains for advantageous engagement. On occasion, it could highlight risks and issues in particular relationships or transactions. But most of all, it is only through strategizing that we can bridge divides and expand convergences. Moreover, by pulling together different dimensions of our strengths and attractions, we can actually credibly present brand India before the world. A strategic approach also helps to widen options. In the current polarized era, India is among the few nations that can simultaneously engage Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Iran, the democratic West and the global South, and the BRICS and the Quad. We have initiated or joined more than 40 different groupings devoted to specific agendas, from renewables and biofuels to disaster resilience and connectivity. Even in a sensitive domain like defense or security, Indian diplomacy actually ensures that both our armed forces and our businesses have the widest possible selection of partners. When it comes to international cooperation, we have also shown the ability to forge different combinations for different domains, be it trade, technology, energy, or security. The endeavor in the final analysis is to keep as many doors open as possible. I have always maintained that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas applies equally to foreign policy. Trade agreements have always occupied a salient position when it comes to our global economic engagement. This is even more so now, a reality that India must recognize. Currently, we are engaged in three particularly important negotiations: the FTAs with European Union and the United Kingdom, and the BTA with the United States. Just this week, we launched negotiations with New Zealand as well. There are also a few others which were already in the pipeline. In the current uncertain and volatile world, it is essential that we appreciate the value of such endeavors. We have to carefully assess the costs and benefits, as well as weigh the price of action versus inaction. There could also be collateral benefits of such understandings, especially when it comes to sensitive technologies. India will take, obviously, an India-first approach in this regard, with Viksit Bharat as our goal. Thinking will also be guided by the prospect of tapping unrealized potential in these relationships. Most of our earlier FTAs are with Asian economies, many of a competitive character. Introducing an overall balance by engaging the Gulf and Western economies has not just an economic logic, but a strategic one as well. Another issue that has strong connotations, strong strategic connotations, is connectivity. India has been a victim of colonialism, of the partition, and of our own past economic policies. We are now in the midst of rectification. This involves a range of connectivity initiatives with multiple partners. To the west, the IMEC corridor and the INSTC are notable. To the east, we are working on the trilateral highway and the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. These are initiatives that require great perseverance and commitment, but what they hold is the ability to actually transform our business environment, making access to and from India much more efficient, stable, diverse, and competitive. Let us not forget that the fifth largest economy, which could be third by the end of the decade, if not earlier, needs more such secure pathways. Even more compelling, however, are the demands of our immediate neighborhood. It is India's interest that there is greater regional integration. Because politics is not always easy, it must be driven, meaning integration must be driven by business, connectivity, and contacts. In the last decade, the Neighborhood First policy has been undertaking to realize these very goals. We now see power grids, fuel pipelines, new integrated checkpoints, roads, trains and railways, waterways, usage of ports, much higher volumes of transactions and flows. So whether it is near or far, whether it is with the developed or the developing, whether it is in goods or services, the importance of business in connecting India to the world cannot be overstated. For some decades now, we have also seen Indian businesses establish a global footprint. I was briefly associated with one myself. Sri Kumaramangalam Birlaji just now has spoken about it. I just want to say that such endeavors really help to shape our image abroad. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude on this note. The last decade has witnessed the cumulative impact of making it easier to do business, of promoting ease of living at home and abroad, of building a digital public infrastructure, and through Gati Shakti, a physical one as well. This has made Make in India much more viable and much more credible. Even as that strikes roots, our talent pool offers the attractions of research, design, and innovate in India. Our diplomacy is currently tasked with taking that message out to the world. This is best done by deepening our partnership, and I'm confident that this sentiment is shared by all of you, and I look forward to working together as Team India. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaishankar, for sharing such brilliant insights with all of us. We'll now request Rahul Kanwal to conduct a nice Q&A session with you, sir.
Very brief.
You know, it's almost never that you have a member of the opposition, and that too someone as erudite as Dr. Shashi Tharoor, saying that he has egg on his face as he wonders at the marvel of how Dr. Jaishankar and the Indian Foreign Ministry navigated the trapeze of handling both Ukraine and Russia with such elan. It's highly magnanimous of Dr. Shashi Tharoor for saying so. Poor guy got into some trouble in his own party.
I've always admired his judgment, particularly about us.
You will get him into more trouble. But the fact is, when that war broke and the kind of position that you said we're not on anybody's side, we're on the side of peace. And to be able to maintain that position through the conflict and actually in hindsight have the world say, yes, you were right. And this is happening in real time where policy is being made by a practitioner such as yourself. Do you want to give us a broad overview of, it's like cricket, the ball comes, you have a fraction of a second of deciding what to do. You could have chosen, like many other countries did, on being on Ukraine's side or pushing further towards Russia. To be able to maintain that balance again and again requires a very high level of expertise. Do you want to give us a framework into how, because a lot of the world order is being upended just as we speak, how you're making those decisions, the thinking behind that?
Well, I think like cricket, you need a lot of net practice. I think you have today a government which is in its third term. It has a lot of experience at its command, particularly when it comes to national security and foreign policy. And I think that makes a difference. But more than that, look, what in a way we looked at the conflict, the drivers of it, the larger environment in a very objective way. I think a lot of other players, understandably, perhaps were carried away emotionally about it. And that clouded their judgment. I think it perhaps created calculations and expectations which are not really well founded. And the other point, look, we've also been tracking not just the Ukraine situation, but the global situation. With a certain amount of, again, in a very sensible way, without being, swayed by the propaganda and the prejudices that we have seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So when there were trends at play, we saw those trends. I'm not saying we predicted every electoral win, but we certainly saw there were forces at play. We saw this is a world that is changing. We assisted from our own interests, but from the interests of the world as yet. So I do put it in a way to a certain amount of objectivity. I think particularly Prime Minister Modi's very, the range of relationships that he has built, the insights he had and which these relationships have, in a way added to it. I think we are seeing a cumulative impact of all of that.
And I'm sure many of you sitting here already know, but Dr. Jaishankar's father, K. Subramaniam, was one of India's foremost strategic affairs experts. And one of the things Dr. J is very, very passionate about is to try and inculcate Indian strategic doctrine from the Ramayana to the Mahabharata to Chanakya, Kautilya. And you've even written books about that. To what extent have you succeeded in ensuring that Indian foreign policy practitioners, students, and the public at large refer to Indian strategic doctrine when they try and make a framework of how to look at what's happening in the world?
It's very hard for me to give a reply about how well or not well I have done. I think the answer is there. But what I have seen over the last, say, 10, 11 years, I have seen in the country, among people who you would not normally expect, much greater interest in foreign policy, what we are doing. There are many reasons for it. One is technology, social media, smartphones. People are more connected. They are able to understand and take interest in many more things. There is also a sense, they are my people. Somebody is looking after them. I should also be involved in that process. So I think the behavior of the government and the policies of the government have instilled in the people a much greater sense of pride and a sense of ownership about what happens abroad. But beyond that, I feel in many ways, look, if you give an analogy, an example which people identify, you tell people, acha wo, look at this Ukraine. Now let me tell you, wo Mahabharat mein bhi aisa hota tha, or Bhagwan Shri Krishna he gave this advice in that situation. Immediately people get it. So when you tell, for example, I've built a lot, both one book to some extent on what Shri Krishna did on the Mahabharat, the other one on to some extent on what Hanuman did in service of Prabhu Shri Ram. So if you appeal or make people think about something they know well, they immediately get it. And I think that's been very helpful, and we should, because if we don't take pride in our history and tradition, how can we expect other countries to do
Okay,
that?
quiz question. Who were amongst the greatest diplomats in Indian history? Who are, you can just put your hand up if you think you know the answer. If you've read his book, then that's a different matter. But if you intuitively know the answer, yes, sir. Hanumanji and Shri Krishna.
Angad.
He said Angad.
Huh?
Yeah? No, that's correct. So thank you. Well done. Can we have a round of applause for him, please? We had historian William Dalrymple at the India Today conclave recently. And one of the things he says, and I'm very curious to know what you think of it, he makes the argument that the Chinese Silk Route is a modern day construct, and that going back in history, there was no real massive trading volume between mainland China and Europe. The real trading was between India and the Roman Empire. And he makes the argument that India hasn't marketed its remarkable history, especially outside. And also the fact that the likes of, say, an Aryabhat, Brahmagupta, Indians don't know as much about, and that should be known much more. How do you look at the fact that Xi Jinping and China, modern day China, has done a much more masterful job of manufacturing myth and pushing their history as they'd like the world to see it versus what we've been able to do so far?
No, I don't think this is a result of what has been happening in the last few years. I think it's a result of what has been happening for about 200 years. Because what happened was, when the British came and colonized India, the British systematically ran down our history. Whereas the British at that time were very powerful. They had an interest in preserving and projecting Chinese history, because they were afraid at that time that Tsarist Russia would come and occupy China. So if you look at the 19th century, for example, the biggest advocates of China were UK and America, especially American missionaries. So, there's a whole school of promoting China. Not now, not Kissinger, not modern era. I'm talking of, early 1800s. In fact, Pearl as Buck was an outcome of that kind of strand of thinking. So, building up China was always, not always, but for a long time, a strategic objective of the West, building them up as a society, praising their achievements, history, and running us down was equally a strategic compulsion of the West. So today, actually, we are starting this competition, or you can say this, projecting of image from very different starting points. I think we have a harder job, and therefore we'll work harder.
In the way the world is nowadays, we sleep knowing the world to be a certain way. You wake up in the morning and then things aren't quite the same given everything that may have happened in DC and elsewhere at night. What keeps you up, Dr. Jaishankar, at night? Do you sleep well? Or are you always looking at the phone ki dekho kya ho raha hai?
I sleep well, and I get up and look at my phone, and I go back to sleeping well.
When you look at your phone, are you able to go back to sleep after that?
Yes. Look, I have, for many, many years, when you deal with the world, you're dealing with different time zones. So you have built it into your system. Pata nahi raat ko kuch hoga, we have to be awake, somebody's phone call. And once you actually got into a position of responsibility, actually, unfortunately, sometimes things can happen, not necessarily good things can happen. So you build it into your cycle. But you have to today watch the world. I agree with you. You have to watch the world, not just at night. I mean, if I'm sitting there and I don't have my phone for an hour, I still start wondering, am I missing? So FOMO is a real issue there. But on the other hand, look at how much we are able to know about the world. The kind of numbers, statistics, what are other people doing. If you are in a business, what are your competitors doing? What are the possible options? So if you trade it off, I think we are far, far better off than preceding generations. I won't exchange it for anything.
Interesting. Henry Kissinger was asked who his favorite foreign minister at this moment was. And the first name on that list was of Dr. Jaishankar. So if I were to ask that, and Dr. Jaishankar, interestingly, in the way only he can, says, in the part of the world that I come from, that's not necessarily a compliment. And that's Kissinger in India. But okay, if I were to ask you, sir, of all the foreign ministers you practice diplomacy with, who comes across as most impressive to you?
You know, the moment I gave you one name, I've lost all my other friends. So, good try, won't work.
Let me try a little. See, he's India's #1 diplomat. You can't expect me to trap him. That's not going to happen. So yes, that round of applause is well acknowledged. Sir, one of the things that's been spoken of for so long is that, and you spoke about it in your address, that India will go from being the 5th largest economy to being the 3rd largest. For a country of this aspiration, India has a very small Ministry of External Affairs, just about 1,000 to 1,100 officers. For context, the United States has 70,000, China has 7,000, even Dr. Jaishankar.
So that's a testament to a quality, no? I mean, वही काम जो है 1,000 लोग कर रहे हैं.
So we don't need a Doge in India. He's already got a Doge working hard. And even Dr. Jaishankar's favorite country, Canada, has about 7,000 plus officers. So how do you look at the question of upskilling and just having more boots on the ground?
I'd give you a serious answer. Actually, we categorize people in different ways. So you say UPSC, they pass UPSC, so they must be this. The next level, they must be something else. I take it as total net employees, because many countries, it doesn't matter at what level, when you go abroad, they declare you a diplomat. So, exactly who's a diplomat, not a diplomat, I think that's not a relevant argument. In fact, we give a lot of responsibilities even to our personnel, non-diplomatic personnel, which others don't give so even to the diplomats. So if you take our total strength would be about say about close to 8,000, if you take it all. Secondly, it's our working style also, and I'm being serious here. We tend to give a lot of latitude. It's like any of you who run a business, you can have a business with a lot of employees, or you can have a much more contemporary business where your team leaders or your, that vertical has a lot of freedom and latitude. And so we are a very, very, I would say, this sounds like self-praise, but it's actually self-analysis. We are among the nimblest foreign ministries. We expect ambassadors very often not just to tell us something is happening, but to tell us, okay, so what's the answer? In some cases, the smart ones may even say, that's the answer, and by the way, I've already initiated it. So I think it's a way of working, it's a way of counting, maybe to some degree our efficiency. But having said that, if you ask me, would you like more people? Absolutely.
Yeah. Super. Finally, sir, as a student of foreign policy, it seems globalization is in retreat and we're back to the way of the jungle, might is right. As a practitioner, if you were asked to describe in one of your books the world order as it exists and India's place in it, what would be your response?
Look, I just went through this conversation, this part of the conversation with the Financial Times. First of all, this thing, there was a great world order, everybody obeyed it, it worked so beautifully, there were rules, laws. That is their myth, Look at it from the point of view of other countries. Where was the world order when people in Africa and Asia and Latin America were not getting vaccines? Where was the world order when there were travel restrictions placed on them? If you look at, even infringements of sovereignty, please count from 1945 how many wars have taken place in the world and who has crossed whose borders. And the pattern which emerges is the guys up there cross into the borders of people down there. So I think we should be very careful buying into this narrative in the first place, that everything was orderly and nice and now somewhere somebody is coming with a wrecking ball. I don't think that is so. The second is, look at the order itself. we say we have a trading, an organization to regulate world trade. Please look at the subsidies. Please look at the, the non-market factors. Look at how much damage it has done to industry in this country. So if the world order was so great, why didn't it prevent all this? Why didn't someone call out that the goods which are being, imported into this country, it's made with advantages, unfair support? People were silent. So I don't buy this idea that everything was great and now things are going to be, somehow not good. I think there were very big problems before. Many of us did not have the courage to stand up and call it out. I think we were one of them who did. Even connectivity, we were one of the few who said connectivity, the world has to agree on what is connectivity. One country cannot decide what should be connectivity. But look at the rest of the world. How many of them spoke up? So, look, we are in the threshold of change. Things will happen. I think whether the change is good or bad, opportunities, challenges, time will tell. But you won't see me going around singing paeans to the world that we have somehow lost. That is not the case.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've had the opportunity over the past 2.5 decades to interview all our foreign ministers, and the fact is each minister is a product of the circumstance and a product of the government of the day. But I don't think we've had as aggressive a batsman on the global pitch as Dr. Jaishankar, and he's also someone who enjoys watching cricket quite a lot. So for that aggression and for that articulation and for explaining why Bharat matters and showing the India way, ladies and gentlemen, can we have a warm round of applause for Dr. Jaishankar? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaishankar. Could I please